Luckily, back then I didn't have a very high. I think I was using Go to training back then, and so I only had a limit of 25. So I had to run it again anyway. So it worked out okay.
So, Michael, welcome. If you weren't here when I said it before, we're going to start about 5 past the hour. And Neale has condensed a lot of material into an hour worth. So we've got a lot to cover and probably a lot to learn. I've got some cats running around me and they're in crazy mode. So if you hear weird noises, that's why. So go on then, drop in the chat where you're joining from if you're not, well, if you don't want to speak and it's late at night or wherever.
Oh, so what time is it there, or what time is it in where you are?
It's 6 p.m.
Oh, 6 p.m. Okay.
Yeah, as the host, I get to choose a reasonable hour.
Yep.
Oh, you're in Colorado as well. I'm in Colorado. Yeah. No, it's fine, Tyler. I understand. What part of Colorado are you in? Boulder area. Me too. I'm actually somewhat west of.
We got someone. Yep, Melbourne, Australia. Woohoo! Ah. My examples use Australian examples.
Okay.
Which is that's something we get frustrated with when we watch other webinars. It's always American examples.
Yeah, dollars always mean something wrong, right? The dates are all wrong.
Oh yeah, and the dates mess with our heads as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to use a year, month, day just to keep everybody as happy as they can be, if that's possible.
Something that I found that made me more excited than it should is how we can change the interface to work with English. So my merge and center is actually spelt correctly.
Correctly. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that, can't you?
Yeah. I only found out about it this year, so that's I'm really frustrated at that.
You've got an S in analyze data as well.
Yes.
Okay. You've got a minute, and then you can get started.
When I wrote my book, which I wrote in English, and I sent it to Wiley, and the first thing came back Americanized. So they'd converted all my S's to Z's. And oh god, that was that. I got it put back. So luckily, so it was published with the ISE, not the IZE.
Okay, well, good for you for pushing back.
Yeah, well, I said most of my book sales would be in Australia, not America. So
fair. So Anshu has asked if you can share the trick of changing the application language as well. If you can remember.
If I remember, and it does require a reset, I think, of something. So I remember that.
Okay, let's not do that.
It's like a system, a reset of a system. But I think I've got a blog post. I think I did a blog post on it. So I'll make a note on the back here, and when we get to the end, I'll have a hunt.
Thanks, Kelly.
Hey. Getting messages that people were invited. Oh, Eric is here. Good. Welcome, Eric. And others. Right, well, you can start whenever you like, Neale. I'm going to mute myself and you have the limelight now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Owen, for arranging this. And hopefully I will have a few converts by the end that range names are not bad. Okay, so range names do split the Excel community. So there are some people who just hate range names. They say they add an extra level of complexity to a file. My belief is that basically if you use them right, then they actually add structure to your files. And I've got hopefully everyone's got the manual. And right at the top, I've got a little formula that says structure equals flexibility. Now, that's not intuitive. Usually structure is associated with inflexibility, but if you have the correct structure, then that can make things a lot more flexible. So that's my belief, and that's what I use range names for, to basically add structure to a file. So let's find out what range names are. So range names is the common description, but Excel calls them defined names. So they're in the formulas tab here. And really, they are named formulas. So that's what they really are, but everyone calls them range names, and that's what I'm going to do. It's called a name manager as well, which gives you a listing of all the range names that are already in here. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete these two because I forgot to delete them. I'll leave the TBL cities. I'll explain what that is when we get there. So I'm just going to delete these two and I'll recreate them later. So basically, we've just got one little table in this file, and at the moment, no range names. So a note on versions. This is an old file. I haven't looked at some of these formulas. I was a little bit embarrassed by one of them that I saw. And I've started doing my webinars back in 2012. And as you can see, this example is back in 2013. And so lots of things have changed since then. So for example, I've got my numbers here that I've keyed in back in the day. Now, just a heads up, I'm Australian. And in Australia, our financial year starts in July, which really sucks because that's month 7, and we end up with month 6. So when you're working with Australian financial years, it's a good idea to have the numbers from 1 to 12 because that makes it a lot easier for a lot of calculations. So that's what they're for. Okay, range names. There are some rules when you come to creating names. Now, you don't think twice about giving a descriptive name to a file or a sheet, and ranges and cells can be very similar. So you can give something a name and then refer to that in formulas. Now, the rules for the names are no spaces, so you can't have a space in a range name. You can use the underscore character, which I believe when you do is called snake case, because I've started learning a bit of Python. And so if you use the underscore character to separate the words, that's snake case. You can use the full stop as well. I tend to avoid that because I don't like it. It's a little bit disconcerting to see a full stop in text. So I tend to use the underscore character to separate words, but you can use it. You can't use a cell reference. Now, that sounds okay until you start thinking, maybe let's say I want to name something QTR1 for quarter 1. Well, this is the name box, by the way, up in the corner here. So we're going to create a name using this name box a little later. But if you type in, and again, a lot of people don't realize this, if you type something in this name box, that's a cell reference, you will go there. So if I type, and let's say I'm trying to name this cell QTR1, okay? And so when I hit enter, it should create the range name, but it doesn't. because we have a cell reference for QTR1. So you can't use anything really with a 3-letter word followed by a number, because that is probably going to be a cell reference, because we have lots of 3-letter characters for our column references. We go all the way out to XFD. Okay, so you can't have a cell reference. If you wanted, you could put an underscore character at the front and have underscore QTR1. That works. So they're the limitations. The other thing is, well, it's not really a limitation. You can only have 255 characters, like only, but try and be descriptive, but also think about using abbreviations where applicable. So I'll use a bit of a combination of sort of full names and abbreviations in this session. Now, they're the rules, okay? So Excel won't let you create an invalid range name. It'll stop you. But you can, I wanted to share some recommendations for range names. So I think it's a good idea to capitalize the first letter of every word that you use. So that's called camel case. And so there is a reason for it. If you make like when you type in Excel and you go equals sum in lowercase and then hit the tab key, Excel automatically puts it into uppercase. All good, no worries. The same applies to range names. So if you use lowercase for your range names and you spell it wrong, then you won't know that. You'll get the name error, but if you use lots of range names in a formula, you won't know which one is wrong unless you test each one. So in general, you should have a capital letter, at least one, in your range names. Now, as I mentioned, I use a capital letter for the first letter of each word. So something like tax rate, I would use capital T, capital R. Okay. I also recommend using prefixes and suffixes. There's an example of that later in the session, so I'll leave that to there, but that can help adding structure to your files. Okay, the keyboard shortcut for range names is F3. So the F3 function key is sort of dedicated to range names. We'll see some examples of it a bit later. If you're on a laptop, you might need to press another key to get to your function key F3. So just a heads up on that. I always use a full-size keyboard when I'm working with Excel. I hate laptop keyboards. Okay, let's build some range names. Now, the easiest way to build a range name, and I need to name this cell here, which is the total days in P9. The easiest way to build a range name is to click the cell, click in the name box, and I'm going to call this TOT days. No spaces, remember, can't have a space. And I'm going to hit enter. It's really important. You have to hit enter, otherwise it won't stay there. When you hit enter, it should stay there. That means that the cell has been identified, and that's the total days. Now, if you move away and then select the cell again, it will always pop up with the name. The drop down will list all of the names as well. So at the moment, I've got the name for a table, which we'll see later, as well as the total days there. Okay, now, that's a little bit laborious when you're creating names. So Excel has something called create from selection. You can see the keyboard shortcut there, Control, Shift, and the F3. Is that F3 again? And that allows you to use labels. So I've got some cells here that have notes on them. They're called notes now. Yeah, I think they're called notes. They used to be called comments. We won't get into that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the range B3 to C4. So what I want to do is these two orange cells, which are inputs, I want them, the first one's going to be named adjustment factor. Notice there's a space in that name at the moment. And the next one's going to be called inflation PA, per annum. Now, if you click create from selection, it comes up with a little dialogue. Now, 9 times out of 10, this will be correct, but you do need to check it. What I want is, it says create names from values in the left column. That's correct. That's what I want. So I'm going to click OK. So magically, when I click my drop down here, I now have an adjustment underscore factor and inflation underscore PA. Excel will not create an invalid range name, and so spaces are replaced with the underscore character. There we go. So there's 2 brand new range names that we can use in formulas. So let's do a very simple formula. So I'm going to allocate the inflation evenly, sort of, or progressively across the months. I'm not saying this is the best way to do it, but it's one way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to +1. Oh, by the way, if you see me start formulas with the plus sign, it's because I'm lazy and I don't want to hunt around for the equal sign. So I use my big plus sign on my full-size keyboard. So it's not a throwback to Lotus or anything like that, even though I did use Lotus. It's just, it's easier to hit the plus sign than the equal sign. Okay, I'm going to do a fairly simple calculation. Now, you might think that using range names means a lot of typing because the names are obviously have to be typed in. But when you start typing, you'll see that Excel is showing you the range names in the same way that it shows you the function names and the table names. So there is inflation underscore PA. That's the one I want. So just hit my tab key and I'm just going to go divide by 12 and times by this sequential number up the top here. I'm not going to use dynamic arrays in this example, but we'll just do that. I'm going to copy it across. So that's going to be like a factor, if you like. So by the time I get to June, I end up with 4%. So I'm slowly increasing the costs between July and June there. Okay, I'm going to create 2 more range names, but these ones are actually ranges. Those were individual cells. Now, I should mention, when you name a cell, you can use that name anywhere else in the file and it works perfectly. That's pretty much the same with the ranges as well, but they work a little bit differently. So just a heads up on that. But with individual cells, you can use those in formulas. So I could, if I had another sheet for the budget, this is, again, it's just an example budget. You could use that inflation underscore PA anywhere throughout the file. And these ones as well. But cell-based ones are really easy to use in formulas. Range-based ones are gonna spill as per dynamic arrays, which we'll see in a minute. Okay, so I've selected that range. So again, these are the 2 names I want to use to create the ranges that are actually going across the page. Control Shift F3 brings up, that's what I tend to use. And again, left column is correct. Well done, Excel. 2 more names are now there. We have inflation and we have days. So there's 2 more names. I need 1 more. These costs. This is a vertical list of names. So again, I can click the button, top row. Excel gets it right again. And now, after a little bit of effort, because when you are using range names, you've got to set it up. And that's the structure that I mentioned before. So once you've set things up, then you can basically, things get a lot easier. So let's build a formula, and this formula is going to spill down and across. It is a dynamic array. If you don't have dynamic arrays, you can just copy it across and down. Here we go. And again, I'm not going to type very much. I'm not the greatest typist. So I like range names because they save typing. So we've got costs down there. I'm going to multiply that by the days. I'm going to divide by the total days. I'm going to times by the inflation factor. It's just inflation, not the PA. The PA is that 4%. So I just want the inflation. And then finally, by an adjustment factor. I don't know if people have created budgets, but adjustment factors are useful because your boss will say, oh, I want to drop all the costs by 2%. And so you can use the adjustment factor to do that easily. Oops, there we go. We're done. So that single formula is populating that range. It's readable. Okay, so your range names create documented formulas. So I'm, dividing days by total days. Okay, so I'm using the days to allocate the costs. I'm applying inflation and I'm applying an adjustment factor. And so you can read it. Okay, it's not, what is it? C12 divided by D times by D8, etc. So when you use range names in your formulas, then it is self-documenting. So that's where you've got to make the decision between abbreviating things and using the full names, because obviously the longer the names, the longer the formula, but hopefully it makes sense when you read it. I'm happy to take questions as we're going. I don't know if we've got many. Looks like we're okay. Cool. Okay. So that formula, and in the olden days, before dynamic arrays, you could have copied that formula across and down to populate the range, and it would have been identical in all of the cells, which is something now that we're sort of getting used to with dynamic arrays. But when you use formulas in the olden days, then range names in formulas, then you had that same sort of effect. Okay. Oh, the name manager, so we can see all our wonderful names appearing now. You can sort by these columns if you wanted to. All of these have a workbook scope. Now, pretty much when I create my names, I always use workbook, so you can use them throughout the workbook. There are limited examples of worksheet, so you can specify a name to work in a specific sheet. That tends to be associated with dynamic charts, which John Peltier is a specialist of. And so, yeah, but normally I tend to work with my scope is workbook. So that's throughout the file. Okay. Oh, by the way, I should mention, you can put a comment in here as well. So if you edit, you can put some comments in here. So if you do want to document your range names, you can put comments in here. I use this when I'm creating custom functions. I use this to describe the function. You could also use it to describe what the range name's doing. Okay. So that was up to page 6. We're doing page 7. Now, there is a reason you can't have a space in a range name. And this is the reason. It's the intersect. It's the intersect character. So I'm going to create a whole lot of names in one go here. We're going to have next day vertically, 2 days and week. They're all vertical. And then going across, we're going to have Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide. There are a few Australian cities. And let's do it. Create from selection. This is both. So top row and left column. Okay, that was easy, wasn't it? So now when I select that, you'll see that. And here we go. Let's say I want to figure out the freight charges for 2 days for Melbourne. Now, obviously, you could use an index match, 2x lookups and all that sort of stuff, but you can use range names. So Melbourne, space. Okay, so the space character is the intersect of one range with another. So that's a horizontal range. And start typing 2 days. There it is. So Melbourne space 2 days is going to return 45. It doesn't matter which direction you go. So you could go 2 days space Melbourne and we get the same answer. If you want to see a rare Excel error, if you put 2 parallel names together, say 2 days equals 2 days, and a week, which they go parallel, so they don't, they'll never intersect, you get the very rare null error in Excel. So that's because it can't get the intersection. So just a heads up that you can get errors there when you try and use it if you use them wrong. So that's a useful technique, and we're going to see how that works later in the session using something else that divides the Excel community. So range names divides it, and if we want to get another division, then we can add indirect function to that, and so I'm going to look at that a little bit later. Okay, emojis. Everyone loves emojis. So if you want to, you could obviously name a cell. You could name that cell. Sorry, some people don't know how to put emojis in. So it's the hold the Windows key down and the full stop. Okay, so Windows key, full stop. Some emojis, my recent emojis are there. So that's how you enter it. So you could obviously name these cells, but you can name a constant. So a constant is a range name that basically you type into and it never changes. So if we define a name, so there's another way that you can use this define name option. And let's say I wanted to define a tick. So I can go in here into refers to and use my Windows dot, and there's a tick. Close that, and I can come back here and say equals tick. So you could use this in a formula. So you could build a formula, an if function that figures out did something, do something that it should have, and then you can show a tick or a cross or a dash. So you can define them, or a heart if you want to use a heart. So you can define them as a range name and then be able to use them throughout the file. That's that. Cool. And yeah, when you have a look at your name manager, you'll see your tick. Excel has put the quotation marks in for me. How useful is that? So normally you've got to go equals, double quotes, text, double quotes. But when I put the emoji in, it did that work for me. So thanks, Excel. And there we go. And again, you could do the cross and the dash, as well as range names. That was on page 8 of the notes.
Neale, before we move on.
Yep.
There was a question about intersect from Tyler.
Yep.
He asked if the intersect operation works with table references.
Yes, it does. I've created some interesting formulas that use that. So yeah, you can use, because you can use the @ symbol to get the current row.
Right.
Yep. And then, but you don't need. Yeah, I'm trying to think. In a table, you've already got your. You can get a column from any other in a table, so you wouldn't really need the intersection, would you?
Yeah, because you would just have
just have the column
and then the column name.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it does. I think I did some interesting custom functions that sort of used the intersection of the row and the column in a table for something else. So I think it is possible. Yes.
But I wonder if you created a table that was never going to change. Let's say it had the months of the year with a bunch of information for each month, and the month name was in the first column. Could you create a name for each row as well? And then you could do it in the same way that you had in your intersect example, but the data's in a table. I'm not sure what you would gain, but maybe that.
Yeah. The problem if you. Okay, I'm gonna have a look at that, because if you. Depends how it takes the reference. I don't think I've ever tried to name a row in a table. I don't know what it would put in, if it would.
I haven't done that. Okay. I haven't done it either.
We'll put that one down for at the end. But yeah, okay. Good question. Okay, message boxes. Now, message boxes are an underutilized feature in Excel. They're really good for dashboards, because you can put the thing anywhere. Okay, so you can create a message, put it anywhere on the dashboard. You're not limited by your rows and your columns. And you can do a little bit of formatting and things like that. So, but there is a limitation. So let's have a look. So I'm going to put a text box in here. Now, I've just got a very simple formula. We're just saying that the year-to-date result was whatever this was. And that's what that message is what I want to put. Oh, by the way, the dollar is a easy way to put the, instead of the text function, most people use the text function. If you're using dollars, then the dollar function is a little bit easier. Now, if you click on the text box, click in the formula bar, equals, and click on the cell itself, then your message magically appears. And if we update this, then your text box magically updates, and you can put this anywhere you want. So it's really flexible. But if you copy this and go somewhere else and paste it, you'll notice that it's linked to E1. Now, on this sheet, there is nothing in E1, okay? And that's the problem, is when you link to here, you're linking to a cell, and that cell is then part of the copy. So rather than do that, give this a name, okay? So what did I call it? I'm just going to call it message. So click the cell, type it in, hit enter. Now create a text box. Click in the formula bar, equals message, hit enter. We're good. Now, when we copy this one and paste it, we keep our message in there because it's linked to something that isn't cell based. This is like sheet based, so it remembers where the thing is. And so again, this should update if I put that back to where we were. So this automatically updates. And so that's an easier way. It's a more reliable way to use text boxes with messages or notes or whatever you want to use it for. So another advantage with range names. Okay, drop downs. Everyone loves drop downs. Okay, so this is that one table name that I had created earlier. So if you're not familiar with formatted tables, highly recommend that you use them. They do allow you to have a lot of flexibility, and range names work really well with table names or structured references, as they're called. So this one's called, if I show you here, this one's called TBL. There we go, TBL cities. So again, these are, I'm from Perth, by the way. So whenever I do training, I always have Perth at the top of the list. So these are some other cities in Australia. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that range and click in the name box and type cities. Now it's going to go away this time because this already has a name, a table name, which takes precedent over the range name. But hopefully, if we go to our name manager, we should see cities. There we go. And you'll notice that that's using what's called a structured reference. So we have the table name, followed by square brackets and the column name. And that means that instead of having to type TBL cities, square bracket cities, we can now just type cities. And that is the big tie-in with range names. Range names make using table names easier, and you can copy it. One of the downsides with range names, structured references, table names, is that when you copy them sideways using the fill handle, the columns change, which is really frustrating. But if you give it a range name and you copy it sideways, no problems, okay? So that's one of the reasons I always convert my structured references into a range name. So much easier to use. Okay, so let's create our drop down. Okay, Alt. So press the Alt key, the letter D for Dave, L for Larry, and that opens up data validation, which is how you create a drop-down list. And we're going to go into the source. If you type F3, you do get a listing of all your range names. And mine was cities, which is close to the top, which is good. So you can just click OK. So remember, F3 is the shortcut for range names. Click OK. And there's our magic list. Now, the beauty with this list is if we add another name, let's put Darwin in. When I go back to my list, we're all updated and Darwin's there. Okay, so that is one advantage with using range names is we can use the drop downs, they expand, all good stuff. Now, there's some new stuff that's just happened. You may or may not have it depending on your version of the subscription version. I think mine is 2503. I'm a version or two behind, I think, but here we go. If you want a flexible, expandable name, but you don't want to use a formatted table for whatever reason, you now have another option that doesn't involve formulas. The other way to do it was using index or offset, things like that, but now it's much easier. So let's see how we do it. Actually, I could use my F3 here. So I'm going to select that range. So I want to call this colors. So I'm going to go Control Shift F3, top row, all good. Now I'm going to edit it, and we need to add a new character to a range reference. So where's our colors? I'm going to click after the colon, and I'm going to press the full stop. Okay, that's new. That's called a trim range function. Trim range reference. What that means is start in C2 and go all the way down to C6, but I'm going to make it a bit better. I'm going to go C600. So what that does, that gives you a flexible range that will expand as things are added between row 2 and row 600. Okay. That's it. That's it. It's as easy as it is. So I can now go here and I'll give it, it's called colors. So let's go Alt DL, list, press our F3, colors, all good. We finish at pink at the moment, so I can go here. Now, one of the advantages with this technique is I can go down here and type, what haven't we got? We haven't got orange. Okay, so that's way down here. This used to be one way to break the other techniques with offset and count A and things like that. But let's have a look at our drop down. Woohoo! Now, a blank cell will appear in these lists, but only once. Something else that's changed fairly recently is you can now repeat things and they won't repeat in the list. It does unique over the list now. So even though I've got 2 reds here, it only shows 1 red. So that's a new feature on the drop down. They sneak that in. I don't really remember seeing anything about that, but basically this is now a unique list. So even if there are duplicates, they get taken out. But a blank cell will appear here. What will it do with a 0? This is a problem with the unique function. So unique will show 0 for a blank cell as well as 0 for a what will the drop down show? Woohoo! Yep. So the drop down. So a 0 is different to a blank cell. So it does show differently. Sorry, I I sidetracked myself there. But yeah, so that new technique is putting the full stop on the end. You can put the full stop on the left of the colon as well. That gives you a flexible start point. I don't know that will become popular. I think it'll be popular to have a flexible endpoint, but I don't know that having a flexible start point would make sense as much as an endpoint. So it's going to be colon, full stop, and then a reference, I think. So that's on page 11 of the notes. That's new. You may or may not have that, depending on your version of the subscription version. Now, we've been creating a whole lot of range names. Wouldn't it be good if we could list them? Well, press the F3 key and there is a paste list. So this is really good for documentation. So this tells you what all of the names are. You can put this as part of your documentation. I tend to put it in my tables and list sheets so that you can see what they all are. And this will list custom functions as well. So it's a good documentation feature. And that's not dynamic. So if you do add a new range name, you do need to redo that paste. So again, it's just F3 paste list, and that lists the workbook based sheets. I don't think it lists worksheet based names. I think it's mainly the workbook, the ones that have workbook as the scope, which is this scope here, which, as I mentioned, I tend to only use workbook scopes, but other people do use worksheets sometimes. So that was page 11. Okay, let's split the Excel community one more time and have a look at Indirect. Right, what I've got here is I've got some statistics, I've got regions, I've got a budget, and I've got the forecast. Okay. One technique you can use when you are using range names is to actually put the range name on the sheet. Now, I want to call this range ACT, standing for actuals, _ north, and then south, west, and then BUD is my prefix. So when I mention prefixes and suffixes, this is what I'm using them for. So I've got the regions, north, south, and west, and then I've got actuals, budget, and a forecast. So I use the prefix as a to help me identify what they are. And each of those is going to go across. Then I've got a current month. So CUR month, and then CUR year to date. So this is my suffix on the end. So I'm using MTH for month and YTD for year. I am an accountant by background, so that's why I'm used to the YTD stands for year to date. And again, this time I've actually used a just January to December year, which is like just so easy. Okay, so I'm going to create a whole lot of range names very quickly. So select that range, select from selection, left column. Now, something I haven't told you, the magical F4 key. So the function key F4, as well as putting $ in the formula bar, also repeats what you last did. So I can select that range and press F4. Just did it one more time. And now I have all of those names created. I've got the budgets, got the forecasts. So once you create it once, you can just use F4 to create that same type of range name again. So there we go. And my vertical name is this way. So create from selection. Aha, first time it's got it wrong. We don't need the left column. Okay, so you always do need to check this one. So top row is what I want. We're good. Now have a look. I want to, in my little report here, I want to bring in actuals, budget, and forecast for the month, and for the year to date, the same. And I want it for north, south, east, or north, south, and west. Okay. If I'm doing it with a formula, I would go equals ACT, where are we? ACT north, space, and this is the current month, so CURR current month. That's cool, that's easy, but I'm going to have to change that to ACT South, ACT West to get when I copy it down. So here's what we can do. The indirect function can convert text into a reference. Now, when you use it with range names, I can do this. So I can go indirect, double quotes, space, indirect, double quotes. Okay, So that is going to give me the same as what I've just entered in the formula. Okay, 12, which is that one. Now, I haven't gained anything yet until I use my cell references around here. So ACT is here. I need to fix the row number on that. There we go. I need the underscore character. And ampersand. Ampersand, by the way, if you don't know, joins text together. And where are we? North. Okay, let's try that. Woohoo! Okay, so the first one's done. Now, current month. That one there, the CURR is consistent. And so then I can link that with MTH. You may have noticed I've got some helper cells here in row 18. And again, I need to fix the 18 there. Oh, I do need to fix the C there. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, this is my Lord of the Rings formula, because this is one formula that rules them all. This formula I can copy across and down, and it's going to bring in my month and year to date and my actuals, budgets and forecasts. Okay, so one formula to rule them all. Copy across, and we're done. So people don't like indirect, and the main reason is you can't follow the formulas. Okay, there is no auditing of indirect function formulas. People used to not like it because it was what's called volatile. It still is volatile, but because our computers are so fast now, indirect, it will slow your calculation down, but if you only use a few of them, you're not going to see a difference. But it does. So they're the two things against indirect. You can't you can't audit the formula, so you can't follow where it's going to go, and you can't, and it is volatile, so it does calculate every single time Excel calculates, which in a big model, if you had a lot of indirects, you would see the impact of that. But as you see, it offers some easy ways to automate formulas. I use Indirect to actually bring a lot of sheets together, which is less of an issue now because we got VStack and HStack and stuff. But in the olden days, Indirect was really good to be able to create one formula that could link to multiple sheets, which was one of Excel's problems in the olden days. Okay. So I'm a fan of it. Indirect is my function of last resort. Okay, so I only use it if I can't do it with anything else. This is a situation that automates a report. It makes it really easy to copy and across. And again, you could this. I've got it here so you can see the results, but you could put this anywhere in the file and it will work. Okay, hyperlinks. Now, hyperlinks, it's a good idea in Excel, but unfortunately, they're really easy to break. So as an example, let's create a hyperlink, Control K, and we're going to go to, the one that we just were at, which is that actual, oh, by the way, hyperlinks can go to define names. We're going to use that a bit later. So let's go back up and go, I'm going to do a link back to this actual forecast sheet here. We're going to go to A1. I'll just say report, which is the text. That's it there. Click there, and that takes us to A1 in the report. Why can't I scroll up? There we go. So that works. All good until I go here and I say report 1. Okay, they go back here. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, so that's one of the problems, that if you change a sheet name, it breaks all of the hyperlinks to that sheet. Okay, we can get around that. We can go here, and I'm going to name cell A1 HL, short for hyperlink, underscore report. Again, I use prefixes on the name to help me describe what things are. For example, if I'm working with checkboxes, I will often put the CHK prefix in front of the name that the cell is, that the checkbox is related to. So again, I use prefixes and suffixes with the names to help me, because if I put all my hyperlinks with a HL prefix, then it's really easy to find all of them at once in the name manager because it's alphabetically listed. Okay, hit enter. Always hit enter. Okay, so that's my hyperlink. So now I can go here. Let's just do this one here. Control K. I can scroll down to my HL. There it is. Click OK. It just puts the name. You can change that. There we go. If I now change my name back and get rid of the 1, it still works. Okay, all good. Now, unfortunately, there is a problem. If I delete row 1, Control minus is a quick way to do that. I've just broken my name. Okay, so now my name isn't valid. Okay, so let's see how to create an unbreakable hyperlink. You have to do it in that sequence. So you create the name to a cell, and now we're going to edit that the range name. So name manager, HL report. Right, here we go. I'm deleting that reference. I'm going to use index, open bracket, select the whole sheet, comma 1 is a reference to A1. That's it. That is unbreakable. Click close. The formula, I'm pretty sure I put, yep, on page 14. So again, you just select the whole sheet. If you click that little icon in the corner, that selects the whole sheet, and that's it. So now, okay, there it is, working okay. Let's delete. Let's delete the row and the column. Okay, let's try and destroy that range name. But it still works. Okay, so the only way to destroy, and if we change the name, it'll all work. Okay, the only way to break that hyperlink is to delete the sheet. Okay, so which sort of gets rid of the need for the hyperlink. So as I said, that's if you want to create a hyperlink that won't break, that's how you can do it, using a range name and that index, comma 1, comma. You change the numbers if you go to a specific cell, just change it to whatever the reference is for that cell. Comma 1 is A1. Okay. Okay, we're going good time here. Factors. I mentioned factors earlier, where you have a factor here, and let's say I wanted to increase cost by 10%. You can just use that cell, and that's going to increase these raw costs get increased by an extra 10%, or your boss says, oh, I'm going to save 5%, so you can change that to 95. Now that's okay when you're developing it, but what if your boss says, oh, I want to do that now, but you didn't create it? Okay, so these are 4 separate formulas. So each one of these formulas is slightly different. And as you can see, it's allocating the costs slightly different. It's using the mod function too. If you haven't had a look at mod it's a sort of it's not a radical function, but when you're allocating costs across months, it can work really well. So I'm not going to cover it, but check it out. You can check out these formulas. These are allocating based on different numbers in the mod here. The mod returns the remainder, which is sort of, you think, why would I want the remainder after dividing? But yeah, a mod function it can be quite useful. Okay, I digress. Let's say now I want to take these 4 separate formulas, and by the way, I've copied these across, so these are not dynamic arrays. So I want to update all of those formulas, all 4 separate formulas, with this factor. Okay, so here's how you do it. We give it a name. So I'm going to I'll be a little bit, just going to call it factor. hit enter. Go into another cell. So any cell that you're not going to change, and equals factor. Oh, not factorial, which is another Excel function there. So factor 1.1, no formatting, so that's it. Okay, here we go. Copy it. Select that whole range. Right click, paste special. You want to adjust formulas and you want to multiply. So this is going to multiply by the factor for all of these individual cells. Click OK. And there we go. So that's now multiplied by the factor. So each of those, it puts brackets around the original calculation, it multiplies it and chucks factor as the name. And every one of those has the factor attached to it. And that's a single factor. So that's a single cell function, a single cell range name. So it's using that. Then you'll say, well, what if I want to do a factor for months? Okay, so I want to do a different factor for each month of the year. Well, funnily enough, it's just the same. So you give it a name. I'll put a RNG in front of this because this is a range. Okay, so that's range factor. Type that into a cell. And this is going to spill to match whatever range you selected. And from here, it's identical. Copy it. Select the range you want to work with. These are all different as well. Right click, paste special, formulas, multiply, done. So now each of these columns, so if I double this, you'll see that updates, but it only affects that column. And if I double this, you'll see it only affects that column. So you can take a raw calculation and then apply a factor to it using that technique. So you name the range, put that name in a cell, copy the cell, and then use good old paste special. Oh, I've got to copy it first. Paste special, and you want to affect formulas and you want to multiply as well. If you do all, I think it will affect your format as well, which you don't always want to do. And I said, this is because I'm using a factor, depending what you're doing, if you're doing something to add to it, then you would use the add, and the same with subtract. So depending on the calculation you're doing, you might choose a different operation here, but mine was a factor that I was multiplying, and so that's why I use multiply. Okay, hopefully I've convinced you that range names are not the devil, and you can actually add structure to your files and then use that structure to make things a lot easier for yourself. So what were we going to do? We were going to have a look at a table and see if I could see if we can relate to a table. Okay.
But before we do that, can I just draw your attention to a question that we had about 20 minutes ago? It's in the chat. It says, I work after setting formula calculation to manual and I press F9 when I move to a next sheet. Do I need to press F9 with name ranges?
Yes.
So because they're formulas, aren't they?
They're formulas. So they're just like any other formula. You will find with the if you are working with manual calculation, that would drive me wild. Then you would have to press it for indirect as well, because indirect requires a calculation to actually update. So the indirect function definitely needs an F9 to work.
Okay, I think that hopefully that addresses the question. I think that's it for questions, but yeah, let's have a look at that table.
Yeah, here we go. And if people have any other questions, I'll do that individually. Yeah. If people have any other questions, feel free to put them in. Random. Ah. Okay, let's get some. Does everyone know a quick way to paste values? If you, these are all, this is a random array. If you drag with your right mouse button to the right and then go back and then release, there is an option to copy here as values. So just as a little tip there. Okay, so we have values. All right, now we're going to have a table. Okay. What do we want to do? We want to select, let's say, that range, and I'm going to name that range. I'm going to see, so drum roll. Is that going to use a table reference or is it going to use just the cell reference? So test name. It's using a cell reference. Okay, so could I force it to use?
I don't think you can just name a row because the only row reference is the current row, isn't it? Which is with the @ symbol.
Yeah, the @ symbol. So what's this? What's the name of the table? Table 2. So if I go there, okay, and use the define name. So table 2, this will be interesting. Table 2, square bracket. Yeah. So how do I recognize A at? What if I try C6? No, that's not going to work. Nah, that's the cell reference. What will that do? No, I'd have to play around with that. I don't know that you could use a range name to refer to a row in a table. A column, definitely, no dramas, all good, but not a single row, because as I said, the row requires the @ symbol to access that row from a reference point. So, yeah, I could play around with that, but yeah, so the other one was that, any other questions or?
Not at the moment, I think. Well, I had one about copying sheets into other workbooks.
Yep.
I know that if I've got names defined in a workbook, I think I can copy a sheet into another workbook and it will bring all the names with it, but I'm not really sure on the details, and I wonder if you could clarify on that point.
Pretty much all of the a lot of the range names go across. I don't know. I think any sheet names wouldn't, unless it was the sheet you were on. Excuse me, but yeah, I'm pretty sure most of the range names do go across when you copy it, which is a little bit of a downside. So you do need to clear those if you don't want them, because they will create a reference to another file, which is everyone hates. And so, yeah, so you do need to be careful copying between files. Also, when you copy a sheet in the file, you can oftentimes duplicate the name as well.
But one of the benefits of copying a sheet with names on it is that if your name is a Lambda function, you can copy your Lambda functions into it.
That is correct. That the Lambdas go across as well. So you can keep the Lambdas and then delete the other ones that you don't need. Yep, correct. Yep. I'm just going to try something here because I've got this name here, which is defined in this sheet, which is TOT days. If I copy this sheet across, okay, I'm just going to go check my name manager. And yeah, so anything that's a single cell name, when you copy the sheet, you then get a scoped name for that sheet. That's when you copy sheets. So any single, or actually it'll work for ranges as well. Yeah, so any name So I had the names defined in this sheet. I made a copy of the sheet, and so those names are separately defined in here as well. Now, I'm pretty sure that if I do like 100% here, it's going to impact this one. Drum roll, I don't think it's impacted this one. So it hasn't. So when you copy the sheet, this name takes precedent because it's in this sheet over the adjustment factor over the adjustment factor that's here. Okay, so if you have a name in a sheet, it takes precedent over a globally or a workbook scoped name.
I think you have to be quite careful with that.
Yep.
Especially if you end up with lots of...
I've got a macro that goes through and deletes all of the sheet-based, all of the sheet-based ones.
Yeah.
Because I all my workbooks work with workbook scoped ones. So any of these would get deleted with my macro. It just deletes any non-workbook scoped range names.
So here's a question. If you've let's say you've defined a name on welcome on the first sheet.
Yep.
You've used it on create names, and then you copy create names. Does it create a copy of that name that is on welcome? Does it have to be defined on the sheet that you copy?
No, it's only when it's defined on the sheet. So,
okay, so
the names, only the names on this one got duplicated. If I used another name, so if I just put something in there and give it a name. Okay, so that's called test. If I reference test, okay, and then make a copy of it, copy of this sheet, then that shouldn't have done anything to test. So test is only on the welcome sheet. Yeah, so it's only when only the names defined on the sheet get duplicated when you copy the sheet.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And again, they take precedent. So what you're looking at is going to work as opposed, and you can use that to your advantage if you want to use, let's say each of these was a state and you want to do a different adjustment factor for each state. Then you could copy, change the name of the sheet, and then you've got different adjustment factors for that sheet. Cool.
Yeah.
No other questions? Someone says, I found I can't use table references within a range name formula, even for columns. Ooh, okay. Well, I've never found that unless you've got something turned off. Because this one here is a table name that is in the cities. So that's the structured reference there. So yeah, I haven't had a problem at all with defining columns. I haven't tried a row yet, so that's a challenge. Can I define a row in a formatted table? But
maybe does it have to involve some operation, and does the operation disable it? So if you try to concatenate something to that cities column in your name definition, does it still work?
Well, if you're using concatenation and you're using indirect, it'll work. So indirect works with references, with table references.
No, but, I mean, like you could create a formula in your sheet right now which references the cities column, and you could put an ampersand and some text, and it would broadcast that concatenation against each item in the column. So you could say equals table to cities, table cities, yeah.
So that's the range name, and then we can compare it to TBL cities square bracket cities. Whoop. So they work they work identically.
Right, but can you concatenate to the end of this formula?
So when you say concatenate, what do you mean?
Just put an ampersand after that, and then put any text. Yeah, so it does work. So my question is, can you do that? What you've done there, can you do it in the name definition? not in the formula with the name. I mean, actually in the definition of the name.
Oh, in the definition?
Yeah. I think you probably can, but I mean, Tyler is saying Tyler is saying you can't use table references in a drop-down list.
Is that cities? So if I go there, it'll be interesting to see if it will accept something like that. Didn't crash it there. Well, there we go.
Looks like it. Okay.
So yeah, so you can do some sort of calculation in the definition. So it is letting you manipulate whatever you've got. Oh, I better save it. I'll send you the completed. I'll send you the completed, and if you, well, I don't know if you can distribute to the people.
Yeah, there's an option to do that.
Yeah. So cool. Oh, sorry. Yes, yeah, I see what he means. Yes, you can't in a data validation drop down. You can't use a reference to a table. That's correct. You have to use a range name. Yes, correct. Totally agree. So that's another reason to use a range name. Okay. Yeah, that's another way to open up the oh, that's paste values, Alt HVV, I think. Or that one.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about when he put that in there.
Okay, yep.
Okay, well, thank you, Neil. This has been enlightening. I've learned at least 3 new things, so I'm
cool.
pretty happy with that.
I aim for
really
1, so that's good.
Really appreciate you taking the time and giving the presentation and the thorough materials. In case anyone is in the call who missed it, if you scroll up in the chat, you will see the link to a zip file that I pasted. I actually should have sent you that before the meeting, and it was only when Neil mentioned it that I remembered that I had forgotten. But that zip file contains the PDF, which describes all of this stuff, and this Excel file, not the completed version, but you can download the zip file and work through all the examples yourself, which is very thorough. So thank you for that.
No worries. Well, thanks everyone. And well, it's evening where you are, so have a good evening. It's morning where I am.
Have a good day.
Yes.
Yeah, I will. So Andre, I will send all of the materials in an email from the meetup page, so you'll get an email shortly. So thank you, Neil, and thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm going to put this on YouTube shortly, and I will, of course, send you the link to that. But other than that, have a good evening or a day, wherever you are. Goodbye for now.
See you later.